Thank you for joining us for the special presentation on women with ADHD. My name is Dawn Wise-Hurto. I am the Director of Technology serving on Delray Artisans Board of Directors. The Women with ADHD talk is held in conjunction with the Unseen art exhibit at Delray Artisans Gallery. That's this month, February 2023. Throughout this exhibit, local artists take us to a myriad of places in their minds, in their dreams, their dives, their experiments, their hopes, their fears. So come see the unseen. The exhibit is juried by scientist and artist Michal Gavish and curated by Peter Michaels. This is the final week of the exhibit. It's open Thursday, 12 to 6, Friday, 12 to 9, and Saturday, the last day of the exhibit, February 25th, from 12 to 6. Delray Artisans Gallery is located in Alexandria, Virginia at 2704 Mount Vernon Avenue. And we have an exhibit each month. So come visit us in March too and see the Fun with One exhibit featuring monochromatic art. Now on to our special presentation. I am pleased to introduce, I'm gonna get a sip of water, start that again. I am pleased to introduce Faith Hendon. Faith has an extensive background in technology and established career in behavioral analysis. She's been a practicing BCBA/LBA since November of 2019 and has worked in the field of ABA since 2017. She's currently pursuing her PhD in ABA from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology with 2 published studies in behavioral journals. Faith provides current in-home services to families with autistic children and other developmental concerns requiring behavioral mitigation and education. Faith follows a modernized, compassionate care approach in ABA treatment with full attention to the personhood and dignity of clients, focusing on relabeling deficits as potential superpowers and helping families learn how to hone unique skills and abilities while increasing understanding of communication methods. Outside of the behavioral world, Faith is musical, artistic, and enjoys helping others and making the world a more colorful place, accepting for all. So I will turn this over to Faith Hendon.
Thank you. Great to be here. Hi, everyone. Just a little quick thing. This little art piece was from one of the AI generators, and it was what I was trying to get out is what I look like with ADD, with all the thoughts in my head in the background and everything. So that's pretty much turned out perfect. Little AI bots. Thank you to Dawn and Erica for having me here. And the introduction that she already went through. Basically, I don't know, a lot of people don't really understand all the technical jargon that goes along with applied behavior analysis and what my role is and everything. So really what I work with primarily is communication, reducing interfering behaviors that might preclude our children or other individuals from accessing the environment around them and forming productive and meaningful relationships, things like that. Also increasing safety awareness and social skills. But everything overall always goes back to communication. So there's a lot of data and graphs and systematic treatment involved with what I do. So it's not just, throwing a suggestion at the wall and seeing if it sticks. Everything is done very planned out and with purpose. As far as research, Dawn went over my outlook on research. Basically, I like to find creative solutions to things that have not been explored enough within ABA yet. Right now, most research within ABA focuses still on primarily male children from 18 months up to 22, and that's with autism, and that's just very closed niche, but there's so much else that we could use behavior for. So why are we even here? I'm going to give a brief overview of the invisibility of ADHD and in women. ADHD is considered an invisible diagnosis because it's something that you can't typically externally see like other diagnoses that you might have. So it's considered an internal invisible diagnosis. Then if you look at ADHD in women, that's doubly invisible. Most research has been done with males by males. And not only that, most women with ADHD are typically misdiagnosed, and I'll go into more detail on that in a couple slides. But how can we make those both visible? Through behaviorism, which is looking at behaviors as observable and measurable. So with ADHD, you have plenty of observable products of that diagnosis that you can see and measure, both as a practitioner or as an individual with ADHD. So as far as women in ADHD, research timeline, we've had over 100 years of ADHD research and treatment, but it's been primarily male focused until about 40 years ago when they just started looking into females with ADHD. But even up until 10 years ago, it was still primarily male focused. And even with the increase in female focused participant research, you still have a higher level of researchers who are male. I think in some of the more mainstream behavioral journals, even, I think the rate of women researchers has gone up to like maybe 35%. So it's still very lacking. It's also still very largely misunderstood. Male typical presentation of ADHD includes the hyperactivity, and the female typically includes inattentive type of ADHD. So the hyperactivity, that's the ADHD you're going to be able to see where kids are ping-ponging off the walls and can't sit still, fidgety, that kind of stuff. They're also a lot of times more disruptive, or emotional regulation is not quite there, but that's also true with the inattentive as well. Inattentive is more where you daydream a lot and go on random tangents based off what anyone says anytime. The under and misdiagnosis of females with ADHD. Males are 2 to 9 times more likely to be diagnosed. And actually, one of the other studies I was looking at, it's basically 50% more diagnosed than females, with different reviews that scope a little bit further. A lot of the misdiagnoses that get given to women include bipolar, anxiety and or depression, and even the diagnosis of being a woman. So the typical, you're hysterical because you're on your cycle this month, and that's the reason. And that's still very common in medical treatment, which I'm sure a lot of you have had to experience, unfortunately. There's one note that the other subgroups were up until recently still even more invisible as far as ADHD diagnosis and even autism diagnoses, whether that's relative to resources available in the community or simply like medical doctors and things like that being biased towards certain types of people, which is common as well. But that has actually kind of caught up, and now Black people are definitely, per these studies, actually they've surpassed the typical white male middle class diagnosis, and the Latinx people as well are starting to catch up to your standard ADHD diagnosis group. So continued with the research. The prior understanding, reasons why females might not be diagnosed as readily. There's still a common theme going as far as the prior understanding of it being a male condition rather than affecting everybody. The inattentive aspects of the female ADHD contribute to it being less visible in presentation. There's lower rates of co-occurring disruptive behavior, where the inattentive ADHD, that's what I was saying, it doesn't quite present the same as the hyperactive type of ADHD. Also, there's some more recent research that shows possible later onset, but definitely later diagnosis of female ADHD, which can sometimes be attributed to the fact that females mature quicker than boys. So they learn those emotional coping tools, and as you can see down here, masking and camouflaging, the observation skills of females, especially, kind of attribute to being able to hide those traits that would be otherwise distinguishable with ADHD. There's still clinician bias towards boys for having ADHD. And then also parent-teacher ratings underreport female ADHD, even if the behaviors are exactly the same as like a brother or something like that. They'd still say, oh, he has ADHD, she's just being a girl. So how can we increase the visibility? This is where behaviorism and ABA come in. So typically with a lot of mental health concerns and things like that, they're considered internal or mentalistic type of things because you can't really see how somebody is feeling, or what their moods are, or what their thoughts are, things like that. So those things usually fall outside of behaviorism and ABA, because behaviorism looks at the observable and measurable product that is out in the world. ABA, applied behavior analysis, is the systematic observation, measurement, and application of methods based on those results. So if you see little Jimmy come up and smack his sister and she cries and throws a toy back at him, you can pretty much see that what happened before relates to what she did. So basically all behavior happens for a reason. And usually there's an environmental factor, which is the external, that example I just gave. There's biological, which happens within the organism. So that would be like your heart rate rising, blood pressure, anxiety, anything like that. That could be like, inside the skin. Then we have two subcategories really. So you have a reflexive behavior, which is going to be breathing, hunger, sex drive. Those are things you can't control necessarily. Things that just happen because you're a human. And then you have conditioned behavior, which is learned, or not necessarily purposefully learned, but somehow it's learned. And with all conditioned behavior, you have your antecedent, your behavior, and then your consequence. The consequence is what maintains that behavior over time. So if little Jimmy came in and smacked his sister, that's his antecedent there, came in. She threw the toy at him, that's her behavior. Consequence, maybe mom came in and like yelled at Jimmy, and then that might continue to reinforce that behavior of her throwing the toy at him. She does it anytime he comes in. That's just like one of the little kinds of things that we look at. But with any behavior, you can kind of look at your own behavior this way too. What happened right before I did this thing that I keep doing, and what happens afterwards that keeps me doing it the same way? And is it something that's gonna be successful for me, or is it something that's keeping me from being successful? So this is kind of how you can also look at ADHD. Like once you are able to learn what your patterns are, you can learn how to deal with them in this kind of model. But as far as the visibility of women with ADHD, future research and practice really does need to do better in advocating for modernizing understanding of methods, because there's still so much deficit. And even just going to get a diagnosis as an adult, the older you are to try and get a diagnosis, the more likely you're judged and looked at as medication seeking, or it also depends on your socioeconomic status, stuff like that. So, but it's not easy the older you are to get a diagnosis. So I pulled a couple slides from my what ADHD looks like that I usually give to parents, because a lot of times, even though the parents I work with are probably ADHD as well, they might not realize it. So they don't quite understand what their kid is going through and why they need treatment or anything like that. And a lot of times the kids I work with have comorbid diagnoses where they have autism and ADHD. So that makes it even trickier. But this is my fun analogy I like to use. So you know the game, everybody knows the game with like the 3 cups and the 1 ball. And normal brains, I guess, can look at the little cup and the ball and follow it around, and they can figure out where the ball is. So having ADHD, it's pretty much like you have 50 different colored balls in 10 cups, and someone's shining a light in your eyes from a mirror, and you're trying to keep track of where all those balls are. So it gets a little bit confusing and frustrating. And it's very quickly feels impossible to keep in mind. So in trying to make this more visible and more understood by people, what I like to go through is what ADHD is and what it's not. Because the common perception, especially from people who at least don't think that they have ADHD, but assume that it's everybody else that they're trying to work with and not them. A lot of times teachers or adults or other people who just don't get it and they want the kid to like sit still and be calm for 6 hours a day. They'll look at the kid and they'll be like, well, he's lazy, or they're just not doing what they're supposed to do. So laziness, non-compliance, defiance, disinterest, that would be your inattentive. Antisocial, that could be either of them, because it could be a coping tool where you don't want to talk to people, or you get overstimulated and you need to retreat and have your quiet time. So lower intelligence, a lot of times people think that ADHD individuals are not as smart. Same with autism, but that's absolutely not true, because while you can have some people who might have some learning disability and things like that, that doesn't necessarily mean that one is the other. And ADHD, along with autism, not something that can be cured and not something that can be simply trained out. So even though I work with behavior, we accept and understand that, you know, it's just a tool that you use in conjunction with whatever other treatment is right for that person. It just helps you learn how to navigate the world better. So what ADHD is, neurological condition. There's a lot of research that shows support for genetic ties to that. It can be treated with behavioral approach, but you're always going to have that biological component in your brain as well. Some of the common traits that are listed: hyperactive, inattentive, forgetful, impulsive, unable to complete tasks, unable to start tasks. Lots of executive functioning things there. The emotional side of it might worry a lot about what people are thinking, about being able to get things done. Lots of anxiety, lots of fidgeting, also like skin picking, or even ADHD people use their hands a lot too. So, you know, that kind of physical stimming or vocal stimming, which is a slang term for stereotypy type of behaviors, where you either repeat or just do sounds or movements just because they feel good. Sometimes it's a coping mechanism as well. So food sensitivities and sensory needs. A lot of times there's just so much going on in the brain that if there's too much going on outside of the brain, it can very quickly overload a person with ADHD. Some comorbidities are anxiety, depression, mood swings, rigidity, meaning like you have to have your system, like everything in a specific way kind of thing. Eating disorders and social withdrawal. So I have a few infographics that some of you may have seen online before that I like to share because they're pretty useful. And anytime I've shown this to some teenage kids I've worked with, it's been a light bulb moment for them. They're like, that's me. And it's really cool to see that, because then they can, once they know and they understand, then they can learn how to work through it and turn all these things that have been seen as like debilitating to them into something that is actually useful for them. So the 3 types of ADHD: there's the hyperactive impulsive, there's the inattentive, and then there's combined. I'm in the combined area. Depends on the time of day and my mood and all the things that I haven't managed. And then we have ADHD paralysis, which if anyone who is ADHD is watching, probably understands very well. It's like, basically it looks like kid is just sitting on the couch all day on their phone and won't get up and clean all their stuff up, and all their stuff is just piling up everywhere. And they must not just want to do it. And that's not how that works. Nobody does behavior just because they don't want to do it. There's something going on. And it's important to try and talk through it and see what that thing is. With ADHD, when you're sitting there getting stuck in your scrolling mode because you don't have the energy to go clean the kitchen, and maybe if you relax enough, then you'll have that energy. You're really going through all these thoughts as well. It's like very self-deprecating types of thoughts, like, why can't I get up? Can't I just get off the couch and go do it? And that's one of the huge things that limits people from being able to successfully complete tasks or even start tasks. Here's our little iceberg picture. So we always love iceberg pictures. Although I don't prefer this one. I really would like to have one that I've seen one for autism that has strengths-based, where it's like it shows what it actually is and it shows all the strengths. This one is not, sadly. But from our standard understanding of ADHD as a deficit, people usually think it's trouble focusing and fidgeting. However, there's all these other things that go into it. From relationships to conversations, forgetting to eat. I do that a lot. I have an app now that tells me when to eat 5 times a day so I can remember to eat, because I'll end up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon forgotten to eat. And if you don't eat, your medications don't work and your brain doesn't work and everything's just off. So impulse control. All of these things are really interesting because I'm building an app for tracking for my eventual dissertation that is based off of symptom severity, and it's going to have a Likert scale kind of thing. So it'll basically look at, did I forget to eat, or I'm super on task and I ate perfectly fine without my reminders, stuff like that, to kind of see and track patterns over time. So I can look at the cyclic effects of hormones on my symptoms, which is something that has not been researched at all. That's something that's very important to me, because also there's maybe 1 or 2 studies that show that the female hormone cycle can actually impact medication efficacy as far as ADHD goes. So in order to help support that and get more research out there and treatment for it, this is like the base work that I'm looking at doing. It's kind of learning how to track all these things, but also as an individual, if you learn how to track these things, you can see your own patterns, and you can see over time, hey, it doesn't look like my medication's working as well because these behaviors are getting more severe over time. It's not just 1 or 2 days. So behavior tracking is fun and helpful. This is a fun slide. Prioritizing. So non-ADHD people can put all their little things into the nice neat little bucket. ADHD, it's not quite a really a bucket, but there's this shiny thing over here that I want to look at, and that looks really fun. And that's probably going to give me a really good dopamine hit, so I'm going to go do that for a while. ADHD burnout cycle. And these are all in behavioral observable terms too. So you can look at any of these things and be like, and use them as a tool to kind of track, hey, is this something that I do every single time? Do I get in this cycle? And this is the thing that I do in this part of the cycle. How do I stop it there so I can not continue to keep doing that cycle? There's a lot of words on this page, but it's basically hyperfixation. Yeah, I can do all the things. Routine and procrastination. I've learned how to turn my procrastination into a superpower, kind of, but it's still stressful. But I feel like I do a lot of good work in procrastination mode. But the key is like figuring out how to procrastinate just enough so that you're still successful and not to the point where you're entering into the burnout stuff, where you start talking down to yourself and, going into this part, because then you end up on the couch scrolling through Facebook and I can't do it. I'm no good. I'll just do it next week, something like that. So what can we do? Learn, understand, and adjust. So working with ADHD. basically how ADHD works and the goals. Focus and attention and emotional regulation are like the executive functioning pieces. Those are the key components with the ADHD. So in order to keep these in check, you really need to make sure that your primary needs are met, whether it's sleep, scheduling breaks, healthy foods, water, exercise, figuring out your own systems. A lot of times we get into hyper-focus mode. We're like, yeah, I'm on point. I'm going to do this for 5 hours. It'll be awesome. But then you forget to eat, you forget to drink water. And after that 5 hours, yeah, you got the thing done, but then you're burnt out for the next week. So you can't do anything else. And then the kitchen backs up and all that other stuff. So knowing that even though the hyper-focus is really cool, that it's still going to be better in the long run to, okay, I'm going to take a break in the middle of those 5 hours just for 10 minutes maybe, then, that's how you kind of combat the effects of falling into things like that. It's also really key importance to understand why the brain reacts the way it does and how medications, supplements, and vitamins work. A lot of people, even a lot of doctors, when I first went through the ADHD diagnosis and medication guinea pigging, none of my doctors ever told me, like, don't take vitamin C when you take your medication, because vitamin C keeps your body from absorbing the ADHD medications, the supplements, or stimulants at least. So that's one thing that I learned from trial and error. You have to wait at least 3 hours for that. That means no orange juice, no grapefruit juice, nothing. But other things, like I take allergy medicine, and at one point I was taking that in the morning because it was a non-sleepy one, but then my medication wasn't working as well. So it's like, I wonder if I switch this to nighttime, if it works better. And it was night and day, complete difference. So if you're having problems with medications working, kind of want to look at all those kinds of things. Even if you're not ADHD and you need medication for other things, always look at, like, what other supplements and things are you taking and how do they work? Like vitamin D is going to make you sleepy. Take that at night. Magnesium, same thing. Calcium and magnesium you're not supposed to take together because one overrules the other. So interesting little points. This is one of the key superpowers of ADHD too. A lot of knowledge about a lot of little things. So increasing positive behaviors. So you want to try and increase your appropriate communication or find replacement behaviors. Accepting that you do have these things is totally fine. When you can accept that and communicate, then you can communicate your needs. Like interpersonal communication. Hey, I don't quite understand nuanced communication as well. Can you just be more direct and tell me what you need when you need something, rather than expecting me to understand it? That's something that you can communicate. So learning what your own needs are to be able to communicate this better will help in the long run too. Self-management, these are your systems. So making lists for things, setting alarms for things, using the calendar, so huge. Once we can learn those things, then that helps as well for success. Self-advocacy, learning how to really understand what ADHD is, the different types, how yours might look compared to somebody else's. It's completely different. Everybody's unique and awesome. So, and communicating needs. Reinforcement of appropriate behaviors. No punishment language or actions. So we tell this to the parents of the kids that I work with, but it's very important to tell this to yourself too. Don't talk down to yourself. If you procrastinated and messed up a deadline, be like, I did it again. What can I do different next time? And how can I do this better? But also, how can you reinforce yourself for doing the thing the right way? If I do it on time next time and I don't procrastinate, I'm going to give myself a little piece of chocolate. That'll be awesome because chocolate is good. Or maybe if I do it on time, I can have more time to go play music somewhere. And then I get to have more social connection in a controlled, happy environment. But you can set yourself up by using the positive talk in the beginning and at the end too, even when you mess up, because everyone messes up and that's fine. Self-advocacy, knowledge is power. Knowing your needs and your own quirks and how you need things done is going to help you ask for those, and with employers or with school or even just between friends or in your relationships. And learning how to provide your own reinforcement or set your own goals. So there's strategies that you can do with that. we do reinforcement all the time. If we go to Starbucks 5 times, I think, however many times, you get the little punch card, and after so many times, you get a free coffee. So it's the same kind of thing. You're just setting up yourself for something positive. When I was younger, I smoked for a little while, but I quit. And one of the quitting things, and I stopped smoking. I shouldn't say quit. One of the cool parts of that is we stopped cold turkey, and our reinforcer was at the end of 30 days, we're going to go out for a really nice fancy restaurant for dinner, because your tastes come back and it's really amazing. And it helped very much. And we got to have really, really good dinner. So it worked out. But learning how to set smaller daily goals and give yourself tiny reinforcers and like a big reinforcer for the end goal is helpful too. If you wait until the very end to give yourself any kind of reinforcement, you're not going to make it, because that's too far off. You want to kind of give yourself something smaller along the way to help give yourself positive bonus points for going forward. So if we're looking at ADHD, especially as women, it's good to kind of look at what it looks like day to day. And some days everything might be a little bit okay, feel confident, hyper focused, super productive. Other days, exhausted, struggling to get out of bed, everything's overwhelming, indecision and paralysis, insecure and brain fog. Yeah. So kind of journaling is really good for that, where you can actually, and this is where I like the app idea, because it's way more convenient. And as somebody with ADHD, the less effort, the more likely I'm going to be continuing to do that. If I wrote a journal every day, I'd probably do it for 3 days and be done with it. So look at your own ADHD. What does it look like? You can create your own little prompt sheets, or you could go to jotforms.com, I think it is. If you Google Jotform, that's the site that I'm using to build my own little app. You can build your own little app with that, or your own survey questionnaire, and then you can kind of link into it every day. And then it tracks your data each day, which is really cool. It's a little bit more technical ability with that, though, than it would be with creating a little page that you can do every day. So once you realize, you can start to see what your little patterns are, you can build your own kind of visual flow chart where if this, then that. Remembering to stick to your systems and coping strategies. They're tools in your toolbox, and it'll keep your ADHD from kryptonite into superpowers, which is awesome. That's going to be one of my initial or next things I'm going to talk about beyond this presentation. So advocating and succeeding as parents with ADHD, with kids with ADHD, for children, and succeeding. As parents, a lot of times, if our kids have ADHD, we have ADHD. So understanding how the environment affects behaviors is really huge. Talking through your own struggles day to day with kids and modeling the coping tools and systems that we use is really important, because if they see that used, they're going to be able to understand and figure out their own systems and work through it as well. Depersonalizing the behavior. Nobody sets out to do things just because they want to cause trouble for somebody else. Nobody does anything just because they're lazy or because they want to hurt somebody's feelings, anything like that. Usually, if you step back, what happened immediately before the behavior? There's the behavior. What happened after the behavior? And you can kind of start to see, oh, okay, so this is what kind of triggered that behavior, and this is why it keeps happening. Maybe they don't want to have the social confrontation with somebody, so they get angry, and then they don't have to deal with that person anymore. It's common things that happen between people. As far as for children, if you have kids with ADHD, school advocacy is huge. IEPs, there's also, you can get IEP advocates if the school is fighting back on providing services for the kids. That happens, unfortunately, pretty frequently, even in this part of Northern Virginia where it shouldn't happen. But trying to request, this is a more new concept, but if you ask for strengths-based assessment and treatment versus deficit-based, almost all the standard assessments look at deficits, like how is it impacting everyone else except for this child. Whereas strengths-based, you can look at, okay, this kid really likes to line up cars and have everything really in order. That is going to be a really awesome strength for being able to self-manage his own or her own routines and calendar later on, because everything's always in a row. It makes them feel better. That's what's ultimately going to be most rewarding. So taking those things that are seen as deficits and turning them into strengths is really huge. Talking about the ADHD regularly with our kids is really important, just kind of normalizing it. So that way they don't feel like, why can't I do the things that everyone else can do, and start that negative self-talk with themselves. Teaching them the systems and coping tools that work for them, keeping things in the same place every time so you don't lose your keys and your phone. Coping tools for, I have too much energy. Okay, let's go bounce around and get our sillies out for a little while. Or, anxiety over having to talk to someone the next day, something like that. Okay, let's talk through it and see what we can do to feel less anxious about it and what might be the outcomes, and kind of walk them through that kind of mechanism. Patience and redirection to the tools are really, really important, as many times as needed, because it's not going to be just one and done. And especially with ADHD, it's going to be a constant cycle. Even once you get that skill down really good, once you stop doing it for a while, you still have to relearn it and reinforce it again to keep it going. One of the tools I really like to use with people a lot is guided questions, because if somebody gives someone the answer, you want to give the answer the first time, because they might not know the answer. But if you give them an answer and then they keep coming back and asking, okay, what was the answer I gave you last time? Or what can you do? Where can you look to find this answer? So giving those kind of guided questions will help them visualize it, physically do it, and apply it more easy going forward. And then there's medical advocacy, especially younger female children in attentive ADHD, because they're not going to fit all the standard check boxes that people are supposed to fit, like the males with ADHD do with the hyperactivity and things like that. And then we can teach others. So self-advocacy, knowledge is power, knowing what your strengths and your needs are, the tools you need to be able to be successful, and insisting that those are allowed in places. It's the same as if you have a vision problem and you need glasses, nobody would say you can't wear your glasses, but a lot of times things that people need with ADHD might be like, I need my phone so I can have my calendar and all that kind of stuff, or I need to multitask, otherwise I can't focus on the one thing kind of stuff. Learning how to provide your own reinforcers and stuff like that again. And that was the end of my presentation. So thank you. Here's my email. If anyone has questions beyond what we answer in the Q&A, feel free to email me.